Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is September, for one thing. It is September 1st, first day of September. Happy September. And, there's some music we could bring up about September. Let's try it. We could violate some copyrights with that. It doesn't matter anymore. There's no copyright law. The Trump campaign has effectively proved that once again. Let's see, who is it? This time they went around with, what was it, campaign music? Oh, Hallelujah, right? They wanted to use that during the convention, and I believe they actually went ahead and explicitly asked for permission this time, and were explicitly denied permission, and subsequently used it anyway. Minor story. We'll see if we can't dig up the facts on that one and provide you with it in case you at home are documenting all the atrocities and planning to file suit yourself. We'll keep you up to date on that. All right. Plenty to catch up on, of course, today. Today being a Tuesday, we have Joan McCarter lined up for the late half of the show. But, of course, any breaking news story filled with enough crazy could potentially pull her away, and you never know when that might happen. And so we always have to kind of keep it loose. Well, we do it with all of our guests, of course, but it always works out. It seems to work out more often for Greg, because I think Abby barks if he doesn't get on the air, and that may be what goes on. And I think Joan's pets, I think, are much better disciplined, perhaps. Maybe that's what's going on. But we love the free spirit that is Abby, and it's an important part of our show. At any rate, we'll keep the lines open and hope for the best. I don't foresee any particular crazy outbreak this morning, but just more of a generalized crazy outbreak. I think, depending on when they actually taped the thing, it looks like we certainly got our dose of crazy last night. Apparently, the last half of the evening was dominated online in social media by circulating clips of an interview of Donald Trump. This is the man who claims to be president of the United States and has made this claim for over 3 years now. But we continue to let him pretend for whatever reason. Sat down with Laura Ingraham, who I don't know what she pretends to be, but basically the upshot of what happened last night was Donald Trump was too crazy for Laura Ingraham. She actually had to step in her, outside of her role as interviewer. She's not a real, traditional mainstream type journalist, of course. She's an opinion journalist, if there is such a thing, on the other side. I mean, I recognize it, and I'm not trying to reserve the right to seek the shelter of that designation on the Democratic side, but not for the Republican side. It's just that I don't know what qualifies as opinion anything on the Republican side anymore. It's just sort of indulging in fantasy, and whatever Donald Trump says is what reality is, and it kind of works that way now. And they're still under that spell. But I don't know. Laura Ingraham, I guess, maybe I don't know whether she thinks she's demonstrating independence. I doubt that. I think she's just trying to help. But yeah, she had to step in a few times and did the normalizing of the president right in front of us without editing or without coming back and spinning things through headlines later on. In particular, I saw a portion of the interview during which Trump is talking about Kenosha and the situation there, and begins to compare the shooting to one of his few life experiences that he's still able to bring to mind readily, golf, which was rather surprising, I think, and begins to compare the pressure that police are under to make split-second decisions and perform, to professional standards, to facing a 3-foot putt in a golf tournament, and that, well, sometimes people choke. The point, if there is one, that he was trying to make, it seems, is that policing is a pressure-filled job, and they have to make split-second decisions, and he was willing to say maybe this one was wrong, and that maybe you didn't have to shoot him 7 times in the back, and maybe you could have wrestled him to the ground or something like that. I think that was Trump's suggestion. But sometimes, people choke, and then he goes on to say that it's like being in a golf tournament and a 3-foot putt. And Ingram actually lets to lean over and put her hand on his to stop him physically, like, here's a touch from beyond, from reality, outside of your electron cloud there, and guess what? There's a whole world out here, and they think you're crazy. Just leaning in and saying, but you're not comparing the shooting to golf, right? Because that would be just no, not that. Just saying, it's sometimes people choke. They choke. Anyway, the rest of the interview was equally goofy. Actually, that was the second of the clips that I saw. The first of the clips was, I think, the more widely circulated, in which he lays out his weird, dark fantasy about there being, I guess, Antifa super soldier paratroopers of some kind circulating about the country in formation on commercial airliners, dressed in black uniforms with gear of all kinds and this and that, unable to describe exactly what they have. But he assures us that they had somebody, get on a plane somewhere in this country. I'm not going to tell you where. And they spotted this, and it's totally true. And it's under investigation right now, so I can't tell you. Like I said last night, the Canadian girlfriend theory of Antifa super soldiers. But he assures Ingram that for her safety, she can't really know. I cannot reveal at this time exactly where they were going, exactly what their mission was. Anyway, it turns out that the source, if you want to call it that, of that stupid rumor has been turned up already. And to no one's surprise, it's not like they were, amazing sleuths or anything. I think anybody who was assigned the task of figuring out what the hell was the president talking about yesterday would have said, well, if that's my job, my guess is Facebook is where that came from. Spend about 10 minutes searching some terms, and guess what? You'll find it. Ben Collins, I guess, got that job or volunteered for it or whatever. And by 8:32 this morning, was ready to report Trump's plane loaded with thugs conspiracy theory matches months-old rumor. And by the way, he's not the first to say, hey, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. That's what Laura Ingraham said to his face. People, the quote was something about shadowy figures of some kind controlling the world or whatever. What do you mean by that? That sounds like a conspiracy theory. That was very smart on her part, because it does sound like a conspiracy theory, because it is a conspiracy theory. So congratulations to the president on that one. If we had said to him on a cognition exam, a mental acuity test, tell me something that sounds like a conspiracy theory, that he will pass with flying colors. I'm pretty sure that would work. But she's sets herself up as the credulous, tough interviewer by saying, what do you mean by that? That sounds like a conspiracy theory. To which he assures her, no, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's a theory about a conspiracy that I have, that I read on Facebook. He doesn't say where it came from, but Ben Collins guesses it right away. And so did you, if you saw the clip. Subheader here says, evidence-free social media posts about groups of people coming to terrorize suburbs. Remember them? Suburbs? Have thrived in recent months, inspiring some people to arm themselves. Long story short, although I intend to tell you the long story, is this is a leftover from that round of stories about Antifa, troops, caravans, coming to destroy every residential neighborhood in America that were shared on Facebook some time ago, that resulted in people grabbing whatever firearms they had and wandering the streets of their town, sure that they were the last line of defense against some sort of internal coup d'etat carried out by no one knows who. And that also resulted in things like, hey, I saw a van or a camper, and there was a black family in it, and everyone knows that the ranks of Antifa are full of black people, which generally speaking they are not. But part of the scare tactic here is to conflate Antifa with Black Lives Matter, both of which are coming to burn down the suburbs, you see. But you recall that we discussed a number of similar rumors that had caused all sorts of problems for idiots, mostly in the Pacific Northwest. This was just another one of them, essentially. Ben Collins has it this way: the conspiracy theory that President Donald Trump pushed on Monday on a plane, that a plane, quote, almost completely loaded with thugs, because that's what I think of when I get on a plane, was set to disrupt protests. That theory was almost identical to a rumor that went viral on Facebook 3 months ago. So, way to go, Grandpa. Thanks for catching up. In an interview with Fox News host Laura Ingraham, Trump claimed that we had somebody get on a plane from a certain city this weekend. Can't remember which one. But it was the intimation was, I can't tell you which one, or then I'd have to kill you, you see. And in the plane, it was almost completely loaded with thugs wearing these dark uniforms, black uniforms, black. They were so black, the uniforms, with gear and this and that. He didn't want to venture into whether to say magazine or clip, you see. All the gear that they let you on airplanes with, the scary stuff, I don't know what that would be. Flashlights? I'm not certain what they would let you carry on to a plane these days. Anyway, hand sanitizer, that now is allowed. He then claimed the matter was, quote, under investigation right now, which of course would be a serious misuse of federal resources if true. There is no evidence of any such flight. When Ingram asked for more information about the flight, the president said, I'll tell you sometime. Soon, 2 weeks, I'm sure. Before mentioning the dark uniformed men who allegedly boarded a plane, Trump claimed that there are, quote, people that are in the dark shadows, vampires, and people you haven't heard of, vampires who aren't famous, I guess, controlling Democratic nominee Joe Biden. Ingram pressed the president for more details and said it sounded like he was alleging a conspiracy. There are people that are on the streets. There are people that are controlling the streets, Trump said. The claim about the flight matches any flight really, matches a viral Facebook post from June 1st. That's going on 3 months old now, I guess exactly to the day, that falsely claimed, quote, at least a dozen males, and you got to look out for males, got off the plane in Boise from Seattle. So we'll ask Joan about that. Makes Boise in the news again. And as you know, it's a small place. So if a dozen people get off a plane in Boise, Joan knows. That's how small it is there. Well, they were dressed head to toe in black. Like wearing suits, you mean? Or no. They had gear. The post by an Emmett, Idaho man warned residents to, quote, be ready for attacks downtown. I don't know whether he meant downtown Boise or is there a downtown Emmett that he could be worried about? I don't know. Be ready for attacks downtown and residential areas, and claimed one passenger, this is terrible, had a tattoo that said Antifa America on his arm. Yes, that definitely calls for dramatic music, don't you think? That post was shared over 3,000 times on Facebook, which really you would think, 3,000 is just not that much. I guess, it's a lot. It's more than 3, for instance. And does that count as viral? Maybe, I guess so. Anyway, it was also shared on other pages from Idaho, and they quickly added it. Collins here says they quickly added their own spin to it, like the Idaho branch of the far-right militia group 3 Percenters. One post claimed that, quote, Antifa had sent a plane load of their people, and that Payette, is it how they're pronouncing it? Payette or Payette? County Sheriff's Office had confirmed it. So it's your fault, Payette County Sheriff's Office, although they probably didn't confirm it, really. Within days, that version of the rumor picked up enough steam in Idaho to steam a potato, I guess, that the Payette County Sheriff's Office had to release a statement insisting that the viral rumor was, quote, false information. So there's your answer. They didn't confirm it. Haha. So I guess just people speaking out of turn on that one. Rumors of marauding bands of Antifa supporters have plagued local Facebook groups, chain emails, and forwarded text messages since mid-May. One of the most viral rumors on an Antifa invasion into the suburbs was taken down after Twitter said it was created by a troll account with ties to white nationalists. Well, of course. Some armed Americans took to town squares in several towns to fight off fictitious busloads of Antifa in June, spurred by false rumors on Facebook pages. 7 days after the original Idaho rumor went viral on Facebook, armed men stood guard over protests in Missoula, Montana, worried about the plane loads of Antifa supporters. It's a nationwide psychosis, really, but it only strikes a very limited demographic slice of America. It's very interesting. And they're allowed to vote and everything. So, you got to watch out for those guys. But there are really people who become convinced. I mean, it would be a great idea to target areas like that, not for attacks, but for migration. I've actually heard that suggested from time to time, that some of these places that are represented by two genuine, honest-to-God, can vote and everything U.S. senators that have fewer people in the whole state than many neighborhoods of large cities around the country have got. And people have suggested from time to time, just sort of thinking out loud, well, what would happen? What would it take to grab control of those two Senate seats and one seat in the House, in order just to send a few people, basically a couple city blocks? If you could pick them up and move them to Wyoming, pick them up and move them to North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, etc., you could change the entire complexion of the state in terms of its voting, provided that you allowed them to vote, of course, when they got there, because that's not a given necessarily with Republicans in control these days. But that would change the balance of power in the Senate probably forever. But we have not done it. So I don't know. I don't know whether they ever read about anybody's theorizing about doing anything like that. It would take an awfully, it would be an awfully long walk to somehow confuse that with an Antifa invasion. I think they just came up with it out of whole cloth and decided to give it a try. And mostly it probably was trolls. Actually quite interested in seeing whether or not they could drive people up the wall and out into the streets with guns. Some may have done it just as on a lark to see if they could make stupid people do something equally dumb, or whether it was motivated by, what would it take for us, what kind of lie would we have to tell in order to get our kind of people out patrolling the streets with guns as some sort of show of force. But against who? I don't know. It just feels like somebody at home in their basement goofing around trying to make people anxious about things, maybe with no political aim whatsoever. Or, of course, equally suspect in all of this could be just, if they're bored over at the Russian troll factories. That was something that they had some significant success with in 2016, manipulating Americans in real life into gathering outdoors in a show of force from one side or the other, both sometimes, even without there being an actual legitimate American organizing the event on the ground in the United States at all. From Russia, from Eastern Europe, your post looks just the same if you lie about where you are, and if you say you're an American organizing a rally in favor of issue A, whatever one you've identified, in the middle of wherever, whether it be Boise or New York City, and then you post again as individual B saying that you're against issue A and you're going to either organize a counter protest to the first one, or you pretend not to know about the first one at all, but conveniently schedule them both for the same time and same location, knowing that people will get there and yell at each other. They had some great success with that last year, or last election, and it would not be surprising at all to see that they were interested in doing it again. And maybe they just didn't think that they would have enough luck to get the opposing groups together all the time. But they could certainly make a bunch of lunatics lose sleep and possibly suffer a wound from an accidental discharge roaming the streets of Emmett, Idaho, or anywhere else that they can get people excited about these things. Look for more to come in the months ahead. How exciting. Never mind that this time the person who has come to believe it has access to the nuclear codes. Anyway, there's more out there that we can scrape together for all of you to enjoy. Let's see. How about a coronavirus segment? Some coronavirus updates. I saw a piece in Newsweek yesterday, which, again, normally I don't run across Newsweek pieces unless I don't go looking for them, unless somebody tweets one. And there are some weird things going on at Newsweek. So I was a little bit surprised to see this coverage because I thought that they had taken kind of a wacky right-wing tilt in their ownership change. But maybe they're trying to cover for that by bringing up this subject. This was something, though, that I saw covered a week or two ago, and it's probably stuck in Pocket, and I'm not certain which publication it was in, so I don't know how easily I'll find it. So I'll rely for now on Newsweek reporting on this. But I know I saw it elsewhere earlier, and I'll see if I can't come up with it. It's a compilation of stories. Secret White House Coronavirus Task Force reports contradict public claims by Trump and Pence. And I am fairly certain, like I said, that about a week or two ago, I saw a similar report, though they were focusing on one particular report from the Coronavirus Task Force aimed at the state of Georgia. Georgia's report is included in this one, but apparently now Newsweek says this had happened for multiple states. Ramsey Touchberry, that's what it seems to, that's some last name, Touchberry, yikes. I don't know what that means exactly, but I don't know. It sounds vaguely dirty. Anyway, I'm sure Ramsey's a perfectly nice person and has not got anything like that in mind when he reports secret White House Coronavirus Task Force reports contradict public claims by Trump and Pence. Here's the story. As the White House repeatedly downplayed the state of the pandemic throughout the summer and pushed for states to rapidly reopen, its own coronavirus task force was quietly, very quietly apparently, secretly in fact, sending reports to states that directly contradicted the public remarks offered by President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, showed documents that were unveiled Monday by a congressional panel. So I don't know who unveiled the one about Georgia earlier, but maybe I can find it for you during the break. The House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis, did you realize we even had that? Released 8 reports ranging from June 23rd to August 9th from the White House Coronavirus Task Force that were provided to states. They just weren't provided to anybody else. The reports, which were not previously available to the public, but some of which were previously published by Public Integrity. Thank you for answering the question. Good job, reporter from Newsweek. That show that while Trump and Pence publicly urged reopenings and tried to quell fears by saying the resurgence of the virus was overblown and that it is, quote, going to disappear, top health officials within the administration warned red zone states about, that would be the ones in the most danger, I guess, of spikes, about increased spread and advised specific mitigation efforts that often went ignored because openly the president and vice president were saying, you don't need these mitigation efforts. Don't use them. You would be a bad Republican if you did. Further, the Democratic-led committee concluded many states are still failing to comply with key task force recommendations, including some recommendations first made nearly 2 months ago. And as we all know, losing 2 months in a fight against a pandemic is just surrender. Rather than being straight with the American people and creating a national plan to fix the problem, Majority Whip James Clyburn, Democrat of South Carolina and head of the committee, said in a statement, the president and his enablers kept these alarming reports private while publicly downplaying the threat to millions of Americans. The panel specifically referenced 4 states, Florida, Georgia, that's the one I heard about, Tennessee, and Oklahoma, and that said it acknowledged, Oklahoma anyway, said it acknowledged, what is this? The panel specifically references 4 states, there they are, that it said, there we go, acknowledged receiving the private reports and recommendations, yet largely ignored them by not implementing additional public health measures recommended by the task force to stop the spread of the virus. Womp womp. I guess they just didn't feel like it. The committee's top Republican, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, David Duke, who's quickly acquiring the baggage, described the panel's release of the task force reports as what? Well, yes, another phony scandal from his Democratic colleagues. He said the state coronavirus data has been available and failed to unearth any new information, adding that Democrats should work with Republicans rather than playing politics during the pandemic. Do you want to know the specifics of his idiocy? He said, at no point in the Democrats' latest fake news do they acknowledge that cases continue to decline. Testing continues to increase. Therapies continue to improve, and vaccine trials are proceeding at a historic pace. Scalise said in a statement, President Trump is leading the national coronavirus response, that's wrong, and is empowering state and local officials to take the actions needed to best protect the lives of those residing within their borders. The earliest White House task force report to states on June 23rd said that 7 states were in a red zone and that new cases were up 70% in Arizona, 72% in Texas, 87% in Florida, and 93% in Oklahoma, which is weird because Oklahoma is, of course, where Tulsa is, and this was back on June 23rd, and that was right after he had his, or perhaps, right around the time of his rally there, the one that killed Herman Cain 40 days thereafter. 1 week earlier, on June 16th, Pence had penned an op-ed that the panic is overblown, he said, about a second wave. And then it showed up. So thanks for keeping us all in the loop on that one. You probably expected just that was happening. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue with the Newsweek article, by the way. Congratulations to the Russian Federation for registering or reporting their 1 millionth case of COVID-19. It's about time. And I saw that yesterday that we were poised to cross that threshold for the Russians some point today. But I suspect they've been suppressing their numbers, as have a lot of countries. But they finally do now, or I don't know whether they intended to admit to topping the 1 million mark. But they've been accruing cases between 4,000 and 5,000 per day for several months now. So they've been on a steady pace toward 1 million. It's just slower going for them, at least in terms of admitting to the number of cases they have. We, of course, have topped 6 million, 6.2 million at the moment. Brazil about to go over the top to, it'll probably take them 2 to 3 days to finish this up and go to 4 million. India on track to get to 4 million probably a day or so after that. They move at a slightly more rapid pace. So there we are. Just thought we'd keep you in the loop on that one in case you were worried about what was going on in Russia and what they were lying about. All right. So as I mentioned, the earliest White House task force report that they got a hold of said on June 23rd that there were the 7 states in the red zone, including Oklahoma, where there had been a 93% increase in the cases. And by the way, I wasn't even done. I didn't get to the highest. There's somebody who had it worse. Joan, hi. It's Idaho with a 134% increase in cases at that point. And as we mentioned, 1 week before the issuance of that report, the secret issuance of that report, Pence had penned an op-ed saying that the whole thing is overblown and there is no second wave. Now, that might not have been a second wave. Maybe that's what he was trying to get at, right? It was just late first wave. But that's what was going on, and that was what they walked into with their rally. The rally, I looked it up, was June 20th. Too soon to say, that is too soon before the issuance of the report, which was almost certainly, complete in draft form by the time they had the rally. So you couldn't necessarily point to it and say, aha, the 93% increase in Oklahoma was due to the rally. But what you could do is say, where would it be among, let's say, if you had to choose the 7 worst places to have a rally. And if I then further said, 7 is too many choices, I want you to give me the 2 states in which it would be the worst possible idea to have a rally at this point of Trump supporters who don't believe in masking when indoors. Your answer, well, I don't know. Actually, a Republican might give me a different answer because this one is based on science. It now occurs to me. 134% increase in cases in Idaho would probably be the place where you would say that'd be the worst idea. Based on the number, based on the increase in cases. I guess you could say, well, 134 increase from next to nothing in terms of raw numbers. It might even be easy to do. In fact, the lower the raw numbers of infections, the easier it is. If you have one and someone infects somebody else, then you have a 100% increase in cases, right? But I guess just based on that, where is growth showing the most dangerous signs? Where should we be the most careful if we want to suppress the growth of the virus? Give me the top 2, Idaho and Oklahoma. All right. And I guess at that point they said, well, if we go to Idaho, there's a good chance Joan McCarter will show up and embarrass us and yell things that are true, and then we'll have to pack up our tent to go home. So we'll go to Oklahoma instead. And dropping in on a place where they had 93% increase in the works wasn't a great idea. Herman Cain didn't mind at the time, but 40 days later he was dead. Anyway, they had another report that they issued on July 5th. So what is that? 2 weeks or so after the first one. Remember, the June 23rd missive says 7 states are in the red zone. 2 weeks later, on July 5th, 15 states are in the red zone. That's over a 100% increase in the number of states in the red zone in 2 weeks, by the way. And that Florida has seen a significant increase in new cases and a significant increase in testing positivity over the past week, continuing from the previous 4 weeks, i.e. the last report we gave you. 2 days later, on July 7th, Trump rebuked a grim assessment by Dr. Anthony Fauci, you know who he is, by saying that, quote, we've done a good job, and I think we're going to be in 2, 3, 4 weeks. By the time we next speak, I don't know who he was talking to, I think we're going to be in very good shape. Again, a 2-week thing, and then he's like, oh, that's ridiculous, 2 weeks. 2, 3, 4, 17, 157 weeks. I think we're going to be in very good shape. Sure. Always trust a Trump to tell you when things are going to be in good shape. Yeah, there's one thing he knows about. Okay, so July 14th, 9 days later, it's another report. You might ask yourself, why does this task force feel like they have to issue another one of these alarming reports every 2 weeks? And why couldn't they wait 2 weeks the second time? They could only make it 9 days this time. Well, this one said 19 states are in the red zone and that more testing is needed. That same day, Trump inaccurately claimed that no other country tests like us. In fact, I could say it's working too much. It's working too well. So he's, task force says, we need to increase testing. He says, I told my people, slow the testing down. And let's see, by about that point this is July 14th. So that's 34 days from the rally. And Herman Cain is on his last legs and has less than a week left to live in this timeline. Just wanted to point that out. An August 2nd report. They waited greater than 2 weeks this time. They weren't that alarmed. And Herman Cain dies in the interim. This one says 23 states now in the red zone. We have 50, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but that's nearly half the states in the country by August 2nd are in the red zone. I don't know exactly what the parameters of the red zone is, but I know you can't load and unload there. That's the white zone. Anyway, they warned about the spread in Louisiana, South Carolina, and Oklahoma again. The week prior, on July 28th, Trump told Axios, remember that it's under control as much as you can control it. Or at least as much as I can control it. They are dying. That's true. This is the Jonathan Swan interview. And it is what it is, the president continued. But that doesn't mean we aren't doing everything we can. We keep issuing reports over and over, as a matter of fact. And I don't know. I know what he's listening to it. I go right out and contradict the reports, but you're supposed to be able to see through that, I guess. On August 3rd, Trump tweeted that cases up because of big, that's capitalized, all caps, big testing. Much of our country is doing very well. Open the schools. And I feel compelled to point out what the capitalization was. Cases up because, all caps, BIG, capital T testing. Much of our capital C country is doing very well. Open the capital S schools. It's like he's writing the Constitution in calligraphy, 1787 style, and just capitalizing things at random. An August 9th report showed that 48 states and the District of Columbia, again, there are 50, and then there's the District of Columbia. 48 states and the District of Columbia were in the red or yellow zones. Okay, that's a bit of a relief. I was like, if we were all 48 of us now in the red zone. But the yellow zone, I know even less about what that one is. But the thing is, we're in zones. That's the important takeaway here, I guess. The congressional panel concluded that many states refused to implement recommendations from the White House Coronavirus Task Force meant to curb the spread. One wonders why. In a letter to the Coronavirus Subcommittee, Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, who recently dropped a lawsuit against Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms over a mask mandate, wrote that Americans in both Georgia and the U.S., both of them, grew complacent. Grew complacent? You made them complacent. You demanded they become complacent. Summer holidays coupled with televised protests caused many to let their guard down and abandon guidance provided by public health officials, Kemp wrote. Of course, those televised protests were fairly famously, I think, largely masked, but the counter-protests were unmasked. But maybe he meant that the counter-protests were the real protests, and that's, sure. Naturally, he's blaming somebody else, of course, even though he's been, like I said, he's suing to stop mask mandates, but he thinks people saw things on TV, you know how people are. They get weird ideas from places, like their political leadership. In other examples, the committee noted that Florida had declined to initiate a mask mandate, despite the task force's June 29th advice to do so. Tennessee refused the mask mandate and to close bars and limit restaurant activity in red and yellow zones, and Oklahoma rebuffed the task force's mask mandate recommendation as well. In total, the committee concluded that after reviewing the task force reports, 14 states have been in the red zone since June 23rd and have refused to impose statewide mask mandates per task force recommendations, including states with severe case spikes like Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Tennessee. So congratulations to all of you for ruining our prospects for recovery. And if you need someone to blame for the lack of football or the lack of anything, the ability to get together for Thanksgiving, the lack of Thanksgiving turkeys, whatever it might be, you know where to go looking, but you know what they'll say when you get there. It's somebody else's fault. Don't look at me. All right, let's move on here. Probably a couple other coronavirus items. But maybe we'll sort of happen upon them as we make our way through the reverse chronology of Pocket. Other interesting items of note, two fairly significant, we'll say, court decisions from yesterday. The one that went the way it was supposed to go, according to, precedent and the rule of law and basic understanding of legal principles, is that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals sitting en banc to review the claim that Mike Flynn's, the case against notorious spy and former national security advisor Mike Flynn must be dismissed, and that the higher courts must issue a writ of mandamus to the federal district court ordering them to dismiss the case in accordance with the motion of the Department of Justice, where Bill Barr insists we really need to stop prosecuting this guy. He's done nothing wrong. He's done everything wrong, of course, but he's on Team Trump, and the boss says I'm supposed to drop the charges against him. The federal judge, taking his role a little bit more seriously, said, what if this is a corrupt motive in dropping the case? Let's take a look at whether or not we ought to be forced to drop the case, given that it doesn't appear that the DOJ is arguing in good faith and that the defendant has confessed to the crimes and pled guilty in the past under a plea agreement. Well, to no one's surprise, the surprise was saved for later on in the day, the D.C. Circuit Court altogether ruled no. Mike Flynn's petition to force the writ of mandamus, forcing the federal judge on his case to grant the Justice Department's motion to dismiss the prosecution, is denied in a reversal of the initial 3-judge panel ruling in Flynn's favor. We found out thanks to the tweet from Courthouse News reporter Megan Minero, and she appears to have nailed it there and took a screenshot of the first couple pages, I guess, of the decision. No reason to wade through the legal jargon on that one. Basically, Trump loses. That's the idea. And of course, they will now appeal, I suppose, to the Supreme Court. I don't know whether they're going to get any review there at this stage. I mean, essentially, the full court's review said not only was the judge right that he did have options in considering the motion from the Department of Justice, but the motion for a writ of mandamus is way premature at this point. And again, just as a refresher, mandamus as a writ is a higher court, or any court, ordering some public official to perform some specific task. That's the name of the of the writ, the order that they would give. If you, for instance, back in the day, had sued what's her name, Kim Davis, the court clerk in Kentucky, saying, "Look, you're the one who issues marriage licenses in this state, and we have this couple that wants to get married, and she says for whatever reason I refuse to issue this license because reasons, and I have overalls, and so does my husband, and for whatever reason, that combination of factors means I don't have to do my job and give you the license." You might seek a writ of mandamus against her, saying the courts will now order her to perform this function of her job. That's basically what it is. And in this case, they were saying mandamus would order the federal district court judge to accept the Department of Justice's position and motion to drop the charges and just drop them already. That's why they sought mandamus. I mean, it's an appropriate form of relief at a certain point in the case, and that's really what the the D.C. Circuit full court en banc relied on in making their decision. You might at some point get all the way through the case on its merits and prove that really this motion to dismiss should have been accepted, but basically you have to exhaust all of your options in court first. If you think the judge is wrong, what you do normally is you wait until the judge rules in the conclusion of the case, and then you appeal the case. But they were trying to short circuit everything by saying, let's just get a writ of mandamus in the middle of the whole action here, which the court said, no, you got to basically wait your turn. If the judge decides he doesn't want to dismiss the case, that doesn't mean the case against you is closed and you've lost. You now go and argue it in front of him. So it's like stepping in, like a little bit analogous to like the stand your ground laws, right? They designed them such that it's not just a defense in court where you get arrested for shooting somebody and you claim it was stand your ground / self-defense on your part, but you have to go to trial and prove it and let a jury decide whether you're right or wrong. So you can legally offer that to defendants that's an affirmative defense you can make. And if these conditions are met, whatever they may be, the jury is entitled to find you not guilty because self-defense. The stand your ground statute is designed to short circuit that and to be available to you as a defense at the charging stage, so that police don't even bother charging you and don't bring any, prosecutors won't bring any charges, and you don't even have to worry about rolling the dice with a jury. This is similar. And what do they call them? Interlocutory appeals, or I'm trying to remember back to my terminology here, but basically the decision of the D.C. Circuit here was, you haven't gone through the process yet. Go ahead. If you lose, by all means, you can appeal and say that the case should have been dismissed, and then we'll have more, a more fully developed record on which to decide whether or not you were right. But right now, it's just you saying the DOJ says this, and that's all there is to it. And the judge makes a good case. No, there's probably more to it than that. The case that came out the wrong way, and way wrong, is elsewhere. And let me grab the tweet that brought this one to my attention. Come on, Pocket, just let me have it here. Kyle Cheney, who prolific tweeter and congressional reporter for Politico, put this one out. The news was that in the case against Don McGahn, in which he was subpoenaed by congressional committees for information. You remember McGahn when he was, of course, White House counsel. The McGahn appeals court, Don McGahn was defying the subpoenas and requests for documents, etc., from the Intelligence Committee, I assume. Pardon me. And, oh boy. All right, well, the frog is creeping back no matter what I do with this thing. Okay. They, of course, had requested documents from McGahn, requested testimony from him. They began, this was where the claims of absolute immunity came from, right? People who work at the White House have absolute immunity from being subpoenaed by anybody, including Congress. And that, too, has gotten to the level of the appeals court. The McGahn appeals court panel, according to Kyle here, says, guess what? The House has no legal ability to enforce subpoenas because there is no law on the books allowing it. It may do so. That is to say, they do understand Congress could be afforded the legal ability to enforce subpoenas. But if they want to do that, then they first have to pass a law, because that's what Congress does, empowering them explicitly to do so. That's very interesting on a number of levels, not the least of which is, of course, it could, if it's taken at its word, and I don't know why they would, this too will have to be reheard en banc, I'm sure, and appealed to the Supreme Court, because of course the Supreme Court has very recently ruled, yes, you do absolutely have that power, Congress, and you're free to use it, and you should go ahead. And so for the D.C. Circuit 3-judge panel to come up with a ruling, I mean, you really have to stretch. I don't even know how they did it. I should read through it because it sounds fascinating, but I don't know how long the ruling lasts, so maybe it's not worth giving your time to. But at the moment, the law in the D.C. Circuit, for whatever reason, this despite a contrary ruling from the Supreme Court, and I suppose you could argue, no, it can't be the law in the D.C. Circuit because it's not the law anywhere because of the Supreme Court ruling. But currently they are claiming, and the DOJ is relying on it, and apparently in another case they've already filed motions based on this ruling saying, aha, see, they say Congress has no authority to enforce subpoenas, so we're not going to honor any of them. So that this ruling would ostensibly leave Congress without any ability to enforce its own subpoenas in court. That is a big difference between, any authority at all and the kind of authority we were usually, at least members of Congress, were depending on. It would leave intact and, in fact, leave Congress with only one option, inherent contempt, which is, of course, also not anywhere explicitly authorized by statute, but as the name implies, it is inherent and implied in the Constitution as among the legislature's powers. Now, other courts, including the Supreme Court, have said, well, the power to enforce subpoenas judicially is likewise really implied in the Constitution. And the strange thing about this particular ruling is there has been a law passed that permits Congress to enforce its subpoenas in courts. And it's been on the books since the 30s, and it's statutory contempt. I mean, when I taught everybody everything I was able to find out about the various contempt of Congress options available, there were, count them, 2. One was, as we said, statutory contempt. That would be where the contempt of Congress charges are voted on, and whatever House is holding this person in contempt. And once accepted and passed in resolution form, the resolution is forwarded to usually the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, the local federal attorney. Although when you're prosecuting contempt against the executive branch, that's where conflicts begin to arise, and you're not really sure whether the DOJ will order its U.S. attorneys to prosecute another executive branch member for this contempt. But you're backed up by the inherent contempt, wherein, you'll remember, the Congress can direct, whichever House can direct its sergeant at arms to arrest the contemnor directly and imprison them until they comply with the committee's subpoenas, or whoever has subpoenaed, whatever entity of the House has subpoenaed this information. And of course, the reason, well, as I explained a moment ago, the reason it's called inherent contempt is that the authority to do so is inherent in its legislative powers delegated to it by the Constitution. The other one is called statutory contempt, and I'll give you one guess why it's called statutory contempt. And I know that you only need one guess because it's in the name. Statutory contempt means contempt that's defined by statute. And statute is one of those things that ordinarily a member in good standing of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals would recognize as having been passed by Congress. That's kind of what statutes are, and I'm not really sure why they don't recognize it, but it is there and it does exist, and it's not hard to find, and I don't remember the citation to it offhand, but actually that's somewhere in my relatively recent Twitter feed. But if you want to, you can just go quick Google statutory contempt of Congress, and it points you right to it, and you'll be able to click on it and see it and read it and everything, and you'll be all excited about it, but that'll just leave you scratching your head and wondering, what is it that you don't agree with here? And I guess there's some wiggle room, I suppose, in saying maybe this statute doesn't necessarily, I guess if they're arguing that this statute doesn't explicitly say that Congress has the power to enforce these subpoenas in federal courts. It's 2 U.S. Code Section 192, if you feel like looking it up. And the quick text of it, it's not even that long. We'll do that just before our break. Every person who, having been summoned as a witness by the authority of either House of Congress to give testimony or to produce papers upon any matter under inquiry before either House or any joint committee established by a joint or concurrent resolution of the two houses of Congress, a lot of jargon in that one, or any committee of either House of Congress, willfully, if this person willfully makes default, or who, having appeared, refuses to answer any question pertinent to the questions under inquiry, shall be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of not more than $1,000, nor less than $100, and imprisonment in a common jail for not less than 1 month, nor more than 12 months. So you can't just hold them, I guess, until they decide to give in to your demands, but you can hold them for up to 12 months, which is a considerable amount of time, I think. And I don't know, to me, there's a statute right there in front of you that says that Congress has got the authority to bring this case in court. I don't know who they think would deem such a person guilty of a misdemeanor, or who would punish them by fine, or who would imprison them in a common jail, if not the courts. But I guess it doesn't say specifically who's supposed to do it. That is a very thin read. It's not even there. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's see. All right, well, I think that probably all the time we actually need to spend on that ruling. I imagine it's going to be relatively short-lived, but if not, I suppose inherent contempt is the concept whose time has finally come, and that's good news for John McCain, probably, I guess, is the person who would benefit from this most. I don't know why, but that's what they always used to say. And let's see, what other fun things? I mean, I guess that's really it for the court cases. I've been waiting for inherent contempt's day to arrive for what I guess is now 13 and a half years. Since I originally wrote a piece that I think I titled "The Dusting Off Inherent Contempt" back in March of 2007. I looked that up yesterday. Of course, it's not a new issue, and I was thinking about it in terms of enforcing subpoenas as against the George W. Bush administration. And I don't know, things have gone dormant since then, but I guess we've been brought right back to it, and it was fairly easy to predict that we would end up here at some point, given the combination of circumstances that we had. A Trump administration that is, well, one, filled with people who don't really understand the implications of what they're doing and don't care, and two, simply want to win at all costs, and three, also who are appointing and confirming judges who likewise don't really care anything about the implications, the legal implications, constitutional implications of how they're ruling. They simply want their team to win. So they come up with reasons, some better than others and some just paper thin, as to why they should win. As I said on our way out for the break, and it might not have all gotten in there before we hit the hard cutoff for the break, it's the thinnest of reeds, and it might not even be a reed at all that they're clinging to here. This is just, I mean, if we're right here, we're talking about a panel of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. This is a very high-ranking court. People like to refer to it as sort of as kind of like the second most powerful court in the country, even though technically speaking, below the Supreme Court, all of the circuits are equal, but the D.C. Circuit tends to be more equal, I guess, than others because it tends to get the hottest and most complicated constitutional questions because it covers the area of Washington, D.C., and these for this reason. Oh, wait a minute. What am I actually? Well, anyway, it's the D.C. Circuit Court, not the Second Circuit. Did I say the Second Circuit? Maybe I got confused between the second ranking. But the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, Second Circuit Court is up in New York, which I guess many people would point to as almost the third ranking because of the financial center and population center, and tends to get some of the hottest cases as well. Ninth Circuit up there too in terms of prestige because of its coverage of California, the other major population center, the other coast. But the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals gets the hot issues that are filed in Washington, D.C. having to do with a lot of our agencies, as distinct from the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, which has jurisdiction over, I guess, exclusively issues that bear exclusively on the federal government and nothing else. But at any rate, it is also the big feeder court, both for judges who then get promoted to the Supreme Court because they're right here and under the microscope and close at hand and obvious and within plain view of the appointing authorities, the president and the Senate. And two, as I said, the clerks, people who clerk for the D.C. Circuit tend to be recommended very highly and very strongly, as the president would say, to justices of the Supreme Court when they're looking for clerks as well. So there's a big tie and a great continuity in the kind of legal thought that is usually expressed between the two. And so for the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals to sit there and to be able to draw a panel that's going to actually, honest to God, come out and rule. And you only need two judges to do it, so it's not impossible. Now that Mitch McConnell has engineered a reversal in the balance of a lot of federal courts, it's a lot more plausible that you're going to come up with a panel that's going to include two nuts who are willing to sit there and say, the law as we've understood it since the 1930s is not the law and it doesn't exist. And sure it exists, but it doesn't anywhere say that this works against Don McGahn. Personally, it doesn't say McGahn anywhere in this statute, so therefore it doesn't obtain to this one, and you're just going to have to take it to the Supreme Court. Sorry, can't help you. That was beyond the pale until now, but it was pretty obvious that it was coming as Armando and many other people became more convinced that the judges that were being appointed to the federal bench, in particular, well, really chiefly by Republicans and then in particular by the Trump administration, were being appointed because they were people that they felt they could rely upon to do something this un-American, upside down, and stupid regardless. They were willing to embarrass themselves before the world in order to secure, insofar as they could, a win for their team. And now it's a question of, is Brett Kavanaugh enough in debt to the Trump administration to similarly embarrass himself? And are there four others who are similarly in debt or similarly convinced that Republicans have to be given a win at all costs and will embarrass themselves in front of the world and say, as one of America's foremost jurists, I deny that the law exists as it is written. And I deny that I participated in a case just a few weeks ago that said the exact opposite, because now we need a different result. And so I'm going to sign on to that. And some people will do that. Others will not. And I guess we'll find out at some point, unless, of course, at some point in between now and then, the full D.C. Circuit says this is ridiculous and reverses, which they might. And the Supreme Court says, shoo, we didn't really want to touch it. I didn't want to be the one that was embarrassed by that. And we'll let it lie as the Circuit Court has left it. All right. So that happened, which is also bad. Back to coronavirus-related news, because that's what's up next in my pocket chronology here. Adriana McIntyre, who I don't know, but happen to have seen on Twitter, being a Michigander, I suppose, picked up on this news. We'll grab the article, but short story of it here is illustrated in the screen grab she took from Michigan Daily, saying, yikes, for the University of Michigan. Why? Well, let me open up the article and we can get the topic here. An op-ed in the Michigan Daily, which I gather is that one of the University of Michigan's papers? I guess so. The university's Summer of Lies. That sounds yikes-ish all by itself. But the hot topic here that Adriana identifies is this clip. All of this, whatever this is, and I think we can figure it out from context, provides plenty of reason to worry. But we now come to perhaps the most troubling development of all. This is, of course, about the decision of University of Michigan to resume in-person classes, a mistake many of us are making these days. President Schlissel, and I gather that would be the president of University of Michigan, said he is guided by UM's values as a public institution. That's what you're supposed to say. But when the decision was made to reopen, University of Michigan's Board of Regents was chaired by Ann Arbor's largest landlord, Ron Weiser, W-E-I-S-E-R, a billionaire Trump megadonor, no surprise there, who has given more than $100 million to the University of Michigan in the last 6 years, which I'm sure was a nice thing to do. And he probably loves the University of Michigan very dearly, and that's probably also true. And I don't know what it buys you with the Trump administration to give $100 million to the University of Michigan, but it does put you in a position where the University of Michigan will feel obligated to you and will put you on their board of regents and maybe even make you chair. That's one thing. And then you can demonstrate your loyalty to the Trump administration, who says that schools should open, by voting to open that school. Whether you think it's safe or not, it's a win for your friends in the Trump administration to whom you have been a mega donor. But there's more. As she mentioned here, the thing about Ron Weiser is he is Ann Arbor's largest landlord. What does that mean? Well, in addition to having given $100 million to the University of Michigan in the last 6 years, he's also closed a new $300 million gift within days of the University of Michigan's decision to reopen. So, his opinion holds that much more weight. $130 million now to the University of Michigan, I guess, if that's on top of the $100 million before. But here's the deal. In one of the biggest conflicts of interest imaginable between public health and private wealth, former board chair, okay, Weiser, well, he stood to lose tens of millions of dollars if students didn't come back this year and pay rent. Remember, he's one of Ann Arbor's largest landlords. He owns the apartment buildings that students rent from him, and apparently that's worth tens of millions of dollars in income to him. So ask him whether or not students should come back, and his answer likely will be, well, I'll lose millions of dollars if they don't come back, and I think they should come back. Now, you might say, well, but on the other hand, sir, science and public health, which would probably sway a lot of people. Maybe you're wrong, and we should defeat your motion to reopen the school. But this $100 million says differently. And so does this additional $30 million that you just gave us a couple of days ago. In other words, it's like that one of my favorite but obscure scenes, the bribery scene from, what are we talking about? Beverly Hills Cop 2? Is that the one that Gilbert Gottfried is in? And there's this, I would say, famous in my mind scene, but nobody else seems to remember it, in which he's trying to hint to, do I have this right? To hint to Eddie Murphy that, he wants to bribe him to get out of whatever predicament he's in. And but he doesn't want to say the words, it's basically, are you trying to bribe me, sir? And he's in his inimitable way, except I'm about to imitate it, saying, I'm not saying bribe or anything like that. I'm just saying, is there something that I have in my hand? He's got his wallet, that if I put it in your hand, it would change the situation. Or however, I'm paraphrasing it because, as I said, not that famous a movie, and therefore not on television enough for me to remember exactly how it said. But basically, that's what's going on here. Ron Weiser is saying, is there any number of millions of dollars that I could give to the University of Michigan to get them to abandon the fact that they are an educational institution and a major laboratory research university and ignore the science that they teach the students and just open anyway? And the answer is yes, $30 million will likely do that. And he says, great, I've got billions. Take this. And then all the students will come back. And if they all get sick, that's fine, just so long as they sign the rental agreements first. Then I don't care what happens to them. So that is kind of a yikes, don't you think? Adriana has a good eye on that one. Who wrote it? Does it say? By Anonymous, a contributor. So I guess thanks, Mrs. Weiser, for writing this thing. I don't know where it came from. An anonymous contributor pens this item for the Michigan Daily. There's an editor's note here that says the author of this op-ed is a staff member at the University of Michigan. We don't know where or in what capacity. They have been kept anonymous due to their fear of retaliation. And I would say that you've got 130 million reasons to be worried about that. So well done there. I appreciate your spotting it. Now we'll all be able to point to that and say, this is outrageous, as we do this dumb thing anyway. Okay, just so that we're clear on how that's happening. Let's see. Another item of some significant interest, and I think Greg tried to slip this one in under the wire yesterday, but didn't have time to get to it. Maybe we'll get to it tomorrow. But I'll ruin it now. Brandon Friedman happened to tweet this one around. A new Military Times survey of active duty troops, which he says has absolutely devastating numbers for Donald Trump. The Republican Party has long considered the military as part of its base, but Biden is now leading Trump among service members 43 to 37. This according to Military Times, reporting on its own survey. So you can check out their methods and all the notes on what it might mean about how they took this survey if you're interested in such things. But yeah, true. Complete reversal for the Republican Party, which typically takes the votes of its service members for granted. And by the way, who also in Trump's weird, illogical, just grabbed it out of, pulled it out of his ass defense of absentee balloting by Republicans versus somehow, as though it were different, mail-in balloting by Democrats, which is totally corrupt, whereas absentee balloting by Republicans is totally acceptable, and he does it, and everybody should. Similarly, military ballots, very often, almost always, if you're deployed overseas or away from home, where you're registered to vote, are mailed in. And also, they factored in very heavily, by the way, in the 2000 decision when it came down to Florida, the Florida recount. Big fight that gave the Republicans the ability to say, well, we ought to be counting those military ballots no matter when they came in, even if they're not postmarked before the required date, because military. And everybody knows that we're supposed to honor the military and respect and support the troops. And if you want to rule out counting their ballots, then you don't support the troops. And, true, in typical fashion, Democrats said, oh, yeah, well, it can't be seen as anti-military. You got to, not that I think the troops were, sending their ballots after the results were in order to try and influence the outcome in Florida. I think they're too busy for that, generally speaking. But the reason Republicans knew that they should be arguing in favor of that is because almost always the majority of the votes cast by service members are in favor of Republican candidates. That is now gone, and I don't know whether we're going to see Republicans, if we get in a controversial situation, they might not believe it, and will just stick with their old policy. But it'd be a hell of a thing to see Republicans suddenly find themselves in the position of arguing, yeah, you got to throw out all those military ballots because they're rife with fraud. So take note, and we'll see you in December or January with that one. Okay, just wanted to get that on the record because it's kind of a remarkable development. Yes, all right, we did speak briefly about the neuroradiologist who is the new Trump pandemic advisor, and apparently overtly, I don't know if we actually mentioned that he's overtly pushing the idea of aiming for herd immunity here in the United States. I think we've discussed a number of times how ridiculous that is and how far we are away from getting to the kind of positivity in this country where herd immunity would even become a possibility. Officially, the numbers that, as we have them are, well, we can check on the latest Worldometers numbers on this, but what did we say? 6.2, just over 6.2 million total cases reported here in the United States. That's just people who've had their cases confirmed chiefly by tests. I guess in the early days, before there was a test, they were making their best guess. But then again, CDC officials and others have also estimated that some 10 times that number may actually be infected out there. But even so, we're talking about a total cases in per 1 million population of 18,755. So you remember the quick math there being that we're talking about maybe 18%. Is that right? Yeah. Or rather, 1.8% rather of the population actually infected at this point, according to that 6.2 million number. So if it's 62 million, if it's 10 times that number, then we'd be talking about 18% of the country having been infected. But that's just the numbers. We still don't know, for instance, how long does immunity, if it exists from infection, if it follows from infection, how long does that immunity last? And as we're now hearing, there are cases, some suspected, some confirmed, that you can become reinfected with the COVID-19 coronavirus in 3.5 to 4 months. So, the pandemic's been going on that long. I guess eventually we'll start to see people getting reinfected here in the United States. Although the people who are 3 to 4 months into their recovery are probably in East Coast cities, or perhaps some West Coast cities, where they are much more conscious of and bigger believers in masking, and so perhaps it will take us some time. Maybe we'll have to wait for the middle of the country to become that infected, recover, wait 4 months, and then still doubt the existence of the virus and get it again. But even if 18 plus or 20% of the country has in fact at some point become infected with the coronavirus, that's still a long haul from the 65% or so that are generally considered to be necessary in order to approach herd immunity. And maybe the number would have to be higher for something where immunity lasts so much less time than is the case with other viruses. So, like I said, it took us 6 months or so. If we get to about 20%, I guess considering that the pace could increase, what does it take? A year and a half to get us to the point where 60-something% have been infected. Whether or not it turns out that they're actually immune anymore, we don't know. So we could be in for massive numbers of infections for another year to 2 years before we get anywhere close to those numbers. And of course, along the way, people die from it. And I think the Washington Post, in writing this up, said, even if the fatality rate is 1%, if millions upon millions of Americans, they estimate our population at about 328 million. I guess maybe that's the last census or whatever. I don't know. But Worldometers has their current estimate at 331 million, and 1% of that is an awful lot of people if we're talking about everybody getting it. And if only 65% of the 330 or so million get it, and only 1% of that 65% die, still talking about, I think they put it at 2.1 million deaths between now and then. And of course, 1% is just what they're hoping for, because right now our observed fatality rate is still over 3%. That is, over 3% of the total number of people who have been reportedly infected, the 6.2 million, have actually died from it. But if as I think we've explained before, if you just take the cases about which we know what the outcome is, and we leave out the question mark cases who are still suffering directly from the symptoms of coronavirus and haven't been determined yet to either have recovered or died from it, it's still over 5%. 5% of the cases that have actually resolved one way or the other have resolved in favor of death. So crossing your fingers and hoping, one, that there is such a thing as lasting immunity, and two, that there is such a thing as 1% fatality rate, which we haven't gotten to yet. We got a long way to go to get there. And I think we've also run the numbers on how many more people would have to become infected and have 0 deaths from it. I think we're like 20 million people away, according to the 6.2 million figure that I get from Worldometers. I think we're like 20 to 25 million additional infections away, and we have to have a 100% success rate in curing those people to get us anywhere close to the kind of fatality rate that they're talking about that would hold the number of deaths down to 2 million. So it's been a really good time to bring in a herd immunity neuroradiologist to be consulting with the moron president who thinks of everything in terms of 3-foot putts, and which, by the way, reminds me this morning I did happen to see somebody, Josh Marshall, characterizing that whole interview segment with Laura Ingraham as comparing it to making a 3-foot putt in golf, which he did, but leaving the joke on the table for me to snatch that up and walk away with. Laura Ingraham sinks the 6-foot putts with this one. Really amazing that was left there for me, but I'm glad it was. Okay, let's see. We have got just a few minutes before our third break. I guess now we could at least throw out this bit of news. I don't know how deeply we'll dive into it or not, but another tell-all book on its way out. We haven't mentioned this one yet. This is Melania's good friend, or former good friend, what's her name? Stephanie Wolkoff, right? Who worked in the East Wing for Melania for the first 2 years or so of the administration. Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, because why not get blue-blooded on us if we can? Who I don't know what her original role was, but at any rate, I remember her for having been assigned the task of pulling together the inauguration, which meant that she was in charge of the world's biggest slush fund. That one, reminder that there are no really serious disclosure requirements about how the expenditure of funds raised for an inaugural committee. You have to report who's giving the money, but you don't have to report at all. This is really kind of surprising. For a campaign, you have to report who gives you the money and who you give the money to, who you spend it with. With the inaugural committee, it's a different story. You have to report who gives it to you, but you don't have to report where it goes. So I figured right from the beginning that was a huge slush fund, and I wouldn't be surprised if we one day learn. We're still waiting to learn that the Trump family was paying themselves appearance fees for showing up at their own inauguration. But I can't prove that that's the case, but that's just my best guess. And they rarely disappoint me on things like that. Well, anyway, she was in charge of that, and people began raising similar questions when it came out that She herself, Stephanie Wolkoff, had been paid an enormous sum to put this task together. She then claimed, as I recall, that the bulk of this enormous sum was actually passed on to subcontractors to pull all of the two parties together, or whatever it is that they did for this scaled down inauguration. But it seemed like a plausible defense. But now she's got a tell-all book spilling it all about Melania. Apparently they're on the outs. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support.
Hello.
Hey, Joan, how you doing? Hi, welcome back, everybody else, to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Rich Radio. Came in at exactly the time where I can't say anything. Although I can, no one will mind much. It just makes editing difficult. But hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you? I'm sorry I made your editing life difficult.
Yeah, you know what? I'll do it poorly. How about that? And then the problem is solved. There you go. And now I've locked myself into it, because if I go and edit it nice and clean, everyone will say, "What were they talking about for the first minute?" So good. Now my job is easier. We fixed it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, last week you promised that there would be an up note instead of our usual depressing stuff, but I have warned everybody that by the end we lose control and then something depressing is reported on, and then our weekly rituals. I'm sorry we talked about such depressing stuff, but as you all know, Donald Trump is allegedly president of the United States, so it's really not going to come out any other way.
Yeah.
So it's not your fault. That's I'm sure a huge relief to you. I don't think you ever felt like it was your fault, but in case you did, don't worry about it. But what is going on? You've had a chance to look around this morning and figure out what's going on. I understand you've been invaded by Antifa super soldiers again in Idaho.
Again.
Yeah, keeps happening. Apparently, I did learn this morning that that's where the president's crazy story about the commercial airliner filled with people in black uniforms and all sorts of gear came from. Apparently lifted right from a Facebook story.
I didn't know this.
You missed that story? You're not on that Facebook page?
Story. I suspect it came from one of Ammon Bundy's guys, since it came out of Ammon, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So
it was one of Bundy's friends, I'm sure.
I'll bet you're right. Yeah, okay. Thank you for making that connection for us. Yeah, I mean, it didn't ring a bell for me for whatever reason, but okay, the guy. Yeah, Emmett's. Do they have? They don't have. What would you say? Emmett has a downtown area, or was?
Well, what they were saying that it was coming to downtown Boise.
Okay, that's what I figured. I was guessing that there wasn't a reference to their invading downtown Emmett, for instance.
And they've been doing a variety of crazy things here in Boise.
Okay.
Trying to intimidate Black Lives Matter protesters.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to intimidate the mayor, who it's all tied in as well with mask orders and with the pandemic, of course.
Uh-huh. Well, sure. Why not?
You know,
It's a hot
rampaging in the State House last week during the special session, breaking windows, being hauled out on office chairs.
Yeah, I saw that. That was kind of funny. And I think the initial report was that he had zip-tied himself to the chair, but then it turned out that
it was wrong, unfortunately. He was just refusing to get out of the chair. So, of course,
just lazy.
You know, state troopers in Idaho are not going to tase him or use force or shoot him in the back 7 times.
No, probably not. And it's a good thing, you know, generally speaking, you don't shoot people in the back, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
That
sometimes
would
it
have
feels
really
like
not been a good thing to happen in Idaho with all of these crazy armed people
a
hanging
little
out in the state
taser,
house.
though. Waterboard. You could waterboard him. I bet he doesn't even think that's torture. They think
Probably
of that.
not.
That's a bit of a throwback for people, but they could try that. But so this was just he wouldn't get out of the chair, so they rolled him out. I guess why put the strain on your back carrying Bundy out if you can roll him, and he'll agree to
They
be
did
rolled.
have to drag him the next day
Oh,
out of the chamber because despite the fact that they said, don't do this again, he did it again. They drug him out and then put him in a wheelchair to wheel him out to the police car.
well, sure, why not? Avoid this. Maybe, though, the legislature could change the gallery seats out for rolling seating as well, just to accommodate this sort of thing, because it's going to be a regular activity, I guess.
Yes, he's banned from the State House for a year, but he's, of course, not going to.
Who cares, right? Trapdoors,
Bundy.
that's another thing they could try, right?
He'll be back.
Okay, well, that's exciting. It's good to know that he's persistent, and
Yes.
I guess that's
So
something.
that was another super spreader event for Boise.
Cool.
As
all right,
you
start to
know,
clock on
Idaho
that.
is in the red zone or had been in the red zone
Yeah,
for coronavirus.
way in there.
We've seen a downtick in reports, but
That's good.
in Trump world, can you really trust reporting? So,
It's always an issue.
so I'm
gonna check your
gonna
chart.
assume that yes, we are that we have got it a little bit under control, but that's pre super spreading event where hundreds of protesters were packed into the State House.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait
Without
on those
masks,
guys.
screaming about how they didn't want to wear masks.
Right, and they didn't even have to scream because they weren't wearing masks. We could have heard them just fine.
Right.
Okay, they screamed as though they were wearing masks. So I don't know. Is that partial credit? Probably not. Anyway,
Probably.
it won't work at the doctor. So yeah, I see. I'm looking at your chart. You Idaho. I'm checking the whole thing out, and looks like there was a little bit of a peak, and you're on a downslope as the last couple of days. But we're only about. Are we even a week out from that event? So we still have some time to wait. So maybe by next week we'll start to hear some news about that, and the cases, if they spread there, we'll start to see an increase perhaps by next week. Maybe let's say 2 weeks from now, we'll have a better indication of how many people shot themselves in the foot, figuratively, by doing this. And really give it 2 weeks and someone will shoot themselves in the foot, literally too. And we'll capture that on the gun fail side of the show. So, what else is new? Even outside your, whether outside your window or in your wheelhouse, where would you take us this morning?
I just finished writing up the reminder that the Board of Governors of the U.S. Postal Service is entirely engineered by Mitch McConnell.
Yes.
And the chairman of that Board of Governors is also a director of Mitch McConnell's Super PAC for keeping the Senate.
Yeah, that I saw that pop up in the news the other day, and although the tweet I saw didn't make it entirely clear what the proof of it was but I guess they included then later a page in the FEC filings from the PAC.
Yeah, the
is
FEC,
that right?
and he has been actually for a while.
All right, it doesn't.
He was in
surprise me.
2018 too.
Yeah.
He's also on the board or one of the directors for what's it called, American Crossroads Super PAC.
Okay, so he's got
that
two
one is a big
under his
Trump
control. Okay, so
thing.
the whole axis there is Trump and McConnell, both he controls or is on the board at least of super PACs for both.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, that explains his compliance with their wishes for the destruction of the Postal Service, I guess.
Yep.
I had wondered whether...
Also, Duncan he's a good friend of McConnell's. He's from Kentucky. Robert Duncan.
Okay.
This Mike. They call him Mike.
Donut, I call him. But yes.
Yeah. Who McConnell nominated to be on the Board of Governors, to be director of the Board of Governors of the Postal Service back in 2018. Duncan had been general counsel and chair of the Republican National Committee starting in 2002.
Okay.
So from 2002 to 2009.
Yes. All right. I mean,
where you might remember we saw under Bush and Cheney a real blossoming of voter suppression.
Yes, true.
Yeah, so
it's
I'm sure it's all just coincidence.
Okay. Because I was going to ask, like, well, what sort of background does he have that would, suggest that the Postal Service was a place for him to land? I don't know, like at least the Postmaster
He's a
General
very good friend of Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Huh? And he's into
so
voter
much
suppression.
so that McConnell got his kid, Robert Duncan Jr., a job as U.S. attorney in Kentucky.
Wow, that's a lot of federal dole for these bootstrappers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I imagine they're. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are secret socialists. But yeah, all right. So dad and son both on the federal payroll now.
Yeah,
that's nice. Good for the family.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch McConnell.
All right. U.S. attorney, is he in Kentucky or elsewhere?
In Kentucky.
Yeah, okay. So he got to stay home as well as get on the payroll. So that's nice. All right. Yeah, that's well, not surprising certainly, but all right. So their biggest vote suppressing, he understood the mission. That is when he arrived at the Postal Service. What do I do here? Same thing that you did at the RNC. Okay. Makes sense. So smooth transition. Wow. Yeah. Well, let's see. That's bad news. No improvement, I note, elsewhere in any of the things that DeJoy, when he was last before Congress, promised to, even the few things he promised to fix, I don't believe I've seen reported that they were fixed. And in fact, the reports I keep seeing is everything continues apace. And maybe he's a big liar?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Pretty much. I mean, he didn't say he was going to fix that much.
True.
He said he was going to stop removing blue boxes.
Right.
And that's pretty much all he said he would do.
Okay. But
he refused to put the sorting machines back. He refused to say he was going to let everybody have as much overtime as they need to get the mail out. So, and he also has refused to provide any of the documents that Congress demanded of him. Like 4 pages worth of... I'm not speaking very clearly this morning. My brain is going out ahead of my mouth.
It's working hard.
He was subpoenaed yesterday. The House Oversight Committee is subpoenaing him. And they listed out 4 pages worth of documents that both Senate and House Democrats had demanded from him that haven't been received yet. Right. So they're subpoenaing all of that documentation, both on the sabotage, on what's happened with these sorting machines, whether he's bringing them back, on his discussions with Steve Mnuchin about what measures he should be taking, everything, how much contact he's had with either the Trump administration or the Trump campaign, and the sabotage itself. So I don't think probably a subpoena is going to work on him.
Yeah, that's an issue.
Because, it's the Trump administration.
Right. And subpoenas in general just might not work at all for Congress. Just now, apparently. So that was part of our first half news. Is apparently at least one panel of the D.C. Circuit says, Congress doesn't have any power to enforce subpoenas. What are you talking about? Don McGahn's case. So and I understand that I did see that somebody added that to their pleadings on another subpoena case right away, and I'm not even certain. I may even have been DeJoy, for all I know. If not, then he's certainly has that in his pocket, and I assume DOJ on his behalf will claim that the subpoena's invalid against him anyway, and then if even if that doesn't work, that there's no right to enforce it, so it's functionally invalid. But I don't know.
And I don't think that 3-judge panel even had Rao on it, did it?
I don't know, but it would be remarkable if it did, because she's been on every other one.
Right.
So my guess is that they don't need her anymore because they've got 35 others that they can turn to. But I'll have to look that up. She's usually the dependable go-to when you need somebody who's just gonna sign a document that's embarrassing. She's the one they go to. But I guess there are more of them now. That one's just inexplicable. I don't know what they're doing other than, I don't know how you explain it other than saying they're just not looking at what the law is. Give me the form and I will sign it, and that will be the law in this circuit until they appeal it to the full panel, and I embarrass myself in front of my colleagues. So I don't know. I should look up that panel. Who did they draw on that one? I don't think I got the screenshot of the decision the way I did with the other one. But I was also wondering whether there was, at any point did Joy not take advantage of the opportunity to say that he did comply with the subpoena, but he mailed the documents and he doesn't know what happened to him? I thought that's what he was going for in all of this, but I guess not. But and I don't know if that's, can you comply with the subpoena simply by mailing the documents? I don't know. I guess so, if you do it early enough. But now you really have to do it way early, because it takes like 3 weeks for them to cross town, if they cross town at all. Well, okay. So we have that. I'm scrolling through your.
We have that. I'm
various...
sorry. I'm.
That's okay.
I'm distracted by one of my proofers.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry very much. Okay.
Let's just do all the proofreading right here on the air. It's very exciting. People want to know what's coming. But okay. No, we'll wait and see.
Me.
Oh, sure.
Now I'm coughing. My goodness, I'm a mess this morning.
Well, take your
My
temperature.
apologies.
That's fine. Let's see. We were just talking about before we went into a break, the new pandemic advisor on the White House. Is he officially on the White House Coronavirus Task Force now? The neuroradiologist?
He is.
Okay.
He is. I wrote about him yesterday.
Yeah.
Lovely guy who believes in herd immunity and also says children can't, apparently, spread it. Not
Perfect,
only do
because
children not get as sick and aren't in as much danger, but they aren't very good spreaders of coronavirus, which is not true.
Well, maybe they can work on it and become better. But it's also not true. So that's a problem.
This is the guy that I don't know. I can't say that he positioned himself specifically to get this job by going on Fox News and saying the kinds of things that Trump likes to hear.
You can say it.
But it's entirely likely.
Yeah, I mean, what else would they... Now, a neuroradiologist, I don't know, maybe I need to ask Greg. Do you know what
Yeah, it
they
doesn't
do?
have anything to do with infectious diseases or epidemiology.
Would that be like reading your CAT scan kind of guy? Or, I don't know, brain scan, I suppose?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
He's a brain guy.
Yeah, all right. I got the neuro part of it. I'm like neuroradiologist.
Not a
I guess.
cardiovascular system guy.
No. Okay.
Not an infectious disease guy.
No. Can kids get brain scans? Are they good at that? I don't know. I think that's the thing. These scanning machines, they don't work on kids. I don't know. I'm not sure what he's going to come up with. But yeah, I'm sure that he must have positioned himself that way, as you described, because what other reason would there be for recruiting a neuroradiologist to this epidemiologist job?
Yeah.
I mean, must the guy invent a pillow or something? Anything like that? That would be
He
relevant?
went on Fox News and he said,
Okay.
to quote, to Brian Kilmeade, when younger, healthier people get the disease, they don't have a problem with the disease. I'm not sure why that's so difficult for everyone to acknowledge.
Well,
yeah,
I have a reason. Yeah.
He says these people getting the infection is not really a problem. And in fact, as we said months ago, when you isolate everyone, including all the healthy people, you're prolonging the problem because you're preventing population immunity.
Right.
Yeah. So the problem is not just that he's there, but that Trump is really listening to him. Apparently, Trump meets with him on a daily basis, or a nearly a daily basis.
Does he play golf? Like, we'll find out, I guess, this weekend. That could be it.
He's actually setting policy. When they decided last week, the CDC has had to walk this back, but when they put out the advisory that only people who are symptomatic should be getting the test, that's coming from him. That's coming from this crazy guy.
Well,
he's telling Trump everything he wants to hear. We've got to get everybody back to work. We've got to get everybody back into school. Yeah. And that's the only way we can get herd immunity. And, okay, so maybe 2 or 3 million people die. But, once we get past that part, we'll all be fine.
Right.
This is what Trump wants to hear. He wants to hear, this is over. I don't have to do anything about it. I don't have to work on it. We just get herd immunity, and then I don't have to think about it anymore.
Yes.
And it's also buttressing Mark Meadows' position in forcing everybody back out into the workforce, forcing schools to reopen by not letting any funding continue for either unemployment, enhanced unemployment, money to states and localities so that they can make up for the lost revenue. It's really giving Meadows support for saying, no, we can continue to fight any more funding going for emergency spending for the virus. So
sounds perfect. Well,
yeah.
In my role as America's assignment desk editor, I would say, yeah, I'd be very interested in finding out. I think the story there is, where did he come from? And I mean, we've traced part of it. You're probably right that it's Fox News. I guess my next question is, how does Fox News discover a neuroradiologist for
he
any
is
reason?
At Stanford.
Yeah.
And he is, I don't know if he's practicing.
Okay.
He's with the Hoover Institute. Of course.
Okay. So they can cast around that. So I guess Hoover Institute most likely said, well, who do we have that's, vaguely medical, that's willing to say these things? This one, I don't know how he got to there, but that's less of a leap. I'm sure donations somewhere along the line will probably do the trick, or I guess his affiliation is with Stanford might do it. But I guess they cast around and say any doctor, medical doctor who will say the following, we can get you a booking on Fox News, and why it's attractive to somebody who's living at Stanford to say, and then you'll move to D.C. for a while, and you'll have to go around and embarrass yourself. And by the way, everybody who has moved into Donald Trump's service has had their dignity destroyed. Would you like to come to D.C.? Yes, I would. All right. Not certain what the reasoning is, but I'd like to know more about the provenance of Scott Atlas, if that is your real name.
Scott Atlas, if that is his real name. Trump was out searching for a doctor that would tell him what he wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Turns on Fox News. Here's the guy doing it. So there you go.
Okay. Well, I'm curious about how those deals are made and struck, and the weird people who accept them. But I would have said, check Mar-a-Lago memberships, golf memberships, and find out who booked him on Fox, and we'll figure it all out. But it sounds like they've got a plausible explanation in his affiliation with the Hoover Institute. Okay, they're a regular supplier of lunatics for live shots on Fox News. All right, like the feeder circuit of D.C., the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court, Hoover and Manhattan Institute and the Heritage Foundation, that's what they do. There are pipelines to finding crazy people to put on Fox News who will say the dumb things necessary for Donald Trump to sit up and take notice and hand over policy decision-making power to them in unaccountable ways, because there's no, there's no Senate hearing for whether or not, super moron Scott Atlas is allowed to whisper in Donald Trump's giant grandpa ears about what to do about coronavirus. So,
giant grandpa ears.
They're getting large. That's what happens to people.
They do. And I've been so intent on looking at his weird makeup every day that
right.
I hadn't noticed his ears.
Well, he's like, because he's very proud of them. He doesn't want to get close to them with the makeup. That's my only explanation for why he stops mid-cheek with the bronzer. Although in this
it's
picture,
very odd. We've been on kind of a kick the last week or so, looking for either weird makeup where it looks like he's put shoe polish on his face, or
it's
really
getting darker.
Good jowl, turkey neck shots.
Yeah. Well,
We've
they're
had
getting
some
more
fun
frequent.
with that. Yeah.
But yeah, the ears, little notice because the giant hair covers a lot of them.
Yeah.
But if you get a good shot from the side, you begin, oh my goodness. That's all of his metabolism is going into growing his ears and not his hands or fingers. So good genes.
Good genes. Best genes.
Yeah. So, all right. Wow. Well, what else going on? I'm scrolling down through your diaries and posts of the last couple of days. I didn't get a chance to stop much on because it got confusing right before I was ready to roll into the story of the Rod Rosenstein play for blocking investigation into Trump's financial ties to Russia. There was a wrench thrown in the works, dispute over how accurate the New York Times reporting was. Is this something that you have followed closely? Or
I have not followed that one closely. I've been looking at some other things.
Yeah, that's what I
like how DNI, what's his face,
which
the
one
House
are we on
guy,
now?
the crazy guy that was
Ratcliffe.
not totally. Yeah, how he's saying, oh, okay, we're not going to tell Congress anymore about Russian election interference or anybody else's election interference. You don't get briefings anymore.
What was there any attempt at justification for that, or just we don't feel like it, or busy?
They say that there was a leak.
A leak. Okay.
Yeah.
So therefore, no more information, period, despite statutory requirements. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that'll take longer than between now and the election to fight out. So that
yes, it will.
Serves its purpose.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
So what everybody needs to do is to get everybody they know who is not going to vote for Trump to get an absentee ballot, fill it out, take it to their county clerk in person.
Mm-hmm.
Vote early. Vote so that your vote is counted on election day.
Yes.
And I don't know what else to say.
I think that's really it. Important, and I guess that too. The next coming issue, and perhaps we could discuss this one in the future, is we're running up against our time limits, of course, but so a lot of people, I guess, a new push on to remind everybody that with all of the ballots to be counted by hand that have been either hand-delivered or mailed in, reminding everybody that it's entirely possible that the actual winner of the election might not be determined for several days after Election Day, and that everyone believes it's Trump's intent to use that to claim victory initially, and that if the full count comes through and he's lost, then he'll just simply say, obviously this late count was fraudulent.
Yes. So it's really important that Biden wins Election Day bigly.
Yes, strongly you should win. Armando makes a good case that Florida is key to that. They count their votes very quickly and happen to have the
always going to say Florida.
Yes. Well, that's true. That's just something he's going to say no matter what. But it also happens to be true.
So it's going to say Nevada, so
Okay, so between the two of them, one of them is probably right. So anyway, yes. But we need to be prepared for that. I'm sure that'll become a bigger story as we approach Election Day. But thanks for coming by, and I hope the rest of your day goes better. I know you were having some trouble this morning, but It's just
I
coffee
hope so.
chat here.
Thank you for that.
I appreciate your effort in doing it, and it makes the show real. So it's okay. We'll catch up with you next week then, and see you in between.
I'm sorry for the ragged edges this morning.
That's what, like I said, it's what makes the show real. So we're willing to put up with it, and it's no problem. It makes it more fun, honestly. People know the show's live. Thanks, Joan. We'll catch up next week.
You're welcome.
And,
Talk to you next
see
week.
you on lines until then. Okay, time now for handing things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Newly added to the cookbook, of course. That's always been there naturally. Let's see what we can round up in terms of what he's got on tap for you today. Rod Rosenstein, either working for Vlad or he's a Vichy collaborator, or making the counterintelligence investigation into Trump's ties to Russia disappear.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
More news here from around the country. A federal judge has blocked Border Protection agents from screening asylum seekers. Georgia ordered by a federal judge to extend its deadline to accept mail-in ballots in the November election. And Bill Barr's COVID-19 nursing home inquiry. We got to get to that, but he'll do it for you today. It's nakedly corrupt, and he'll cover it for you next.